everybody. Welcome to Streams Parent Cafe. I'm really excited about today's conversation where I have, honestly, Andrew, I have been anxiously waiting to get you in a room to be able to talk to you about this discussion. As you know, I'm really huge on parent advocacy and parents being able to support their children's education. So without further ado, I'm going to have you introduce yourself. Just take about 2 to 3 minutes to tell people who you are and why you decided to join the conversation.
Hi, lovely being here. Thank you. My name is Andrew Martin. I work for Nextflix. I'm in part of the production safety team at Nextflix, and I've been there for about 4.5 years. Prior to that, worked with Sony Pictures, doing the same thing for about 2.5 years. And then prior to that, environmental health and safety consulting for all manner of industries around the world. I'm glad to be here because I have 3 boys, and as a parent and a professional, it's an opportunity for me to kind of do a bunch of things when I meet with folks as wonderful as you, to discuss the future, our future as parents, but most importantly, the future of our world. And as a consultant and somebody who supports storytellers around the world, it's a unique opportunity to kind of let folks know how many of their own stories are so important to the world. As a matter of fact, every person's story is really important to the way the world works. And our ability to connect with one another, to grow the collective of human beings is primary to making sure that our futures are bright. So I'm really excited to be here to talk to you.
Well, we're excited to have you. And this important topic of the future work, as parents, and you explain that you are a parent, you've done a wealth of things. What should parents be thinking about in terms of the future work? What does that look like to you?
Great question. I've been actually thinking about this pretty much for as long as I've been at work. One of the biggest pieces of this, as a person who remembers what it was like to be a kid, and a kid who didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. I think the most important thing we should tell our kids, as well as ourselves, is that every person is uniquely suited to fit in somewhere in this world.
That's good.
And I think that's the important piece that we lose. I know there's a lot of competition for sort of the most lucrative and quote unquote wanted positions in the world. But truthfully, this world does not exist in the way it is and doesn't grow in the best ways if we don't really connect people with their purpose. And I think that's the important piece. So what I tell my own kids, and what I've told myself since I was a child is, look, there's got to be a reason why I'm here. There's got to be a reason why you're here. And if there is, and we truly believe that, then maybe it's our job to just be our best selves and kind of put ourselves in the best position to do something good for ourselves and those around us. And once that happens, I think we're all adaptable, and to some degree we can fit where we need to and do the best we can with a lot of people who are helping and supporting us.
I like that. And even when we had our pre-discussion, even about the future work, you look at competition very different. You don't look at it as being a competitive market. And I know I grew up hearing that you got to be the best at everything, Nikia. You have to get the best grades and you got to show up on time and do more than everyone else. And the fact that you're a woman and you happen to be a woman of color, you even got to do that much more. So talk to me a little bit about how you look at competition, or is it competition?
I look at it as the environment kind of honing us. So wherever you are, there are forces against which you operate and walk and work that make you stronger. So in that sense, we're not really competing against someone else who has a different walk, because I'm literally not in their space. So I can't replicate their experience in my own. So why would I want to try? I have just enough here for me to manage. So in that context, I'm not really competing against anyone else. I'm literally competing with myself to do the most I can with what I've been given, and to leverage that against the environment within which I work, and to incorporate those people around me to help me to do those things to the best of my ability. So I'm not really competing against any other person, because I'm the only me that is allowed to be in this universe right now, sitting right here. So I have enough to do. Let me get on with this and ask the folks around me to support me in this that I'm required to do. So I'm never competing against anyone, even if, and I've done this before, even if I'm competing for quote unquote a position in some place or with a group, there is a point where I can't do what that other person did. I literally can't. I do what I can do. And whether I fit is the key. In that moment in time, do I fit in that space? And if I don't, that means there's another space in time and in place where I do fit. Let me make sure I find that place and do my best there.
That's so good because that takes so much pressure off of students and parents too. Because, with COVID, a lot has happened. And so I'm sure there's going to be some parents that's listening to this discussion and needing to get themselves back out into the workforce. And so just know that it's not competition. According to our scholar expert, it's really your right fit, right? And so it's finding out where you fit the best for your skills, your personality, wherever you fit. So take the pressure off of your kids and yourselves. Okay. Just find your right fit. I love that. So I've started that. I'm using that, and I'll be quoting you on that.
Thank
so
you.
Tell us a little bit about your career journey, because I'm sure you mentioned so many things that you're doing and you've done. So tell us how you even got started.
Oh, okay. I'm going to start sort of at the beginning-ish.
Okay.
So I went to college, and late in my life in high school, I became an athlete and started playing football. So that was a thing. I think I started in 10th grade. And I was a late bloomer. I was a very small child, very weak child, very slow child. But for some reason, I grew into myself and I was able to play football. That progressed into playing football at the college level, and through a lot of work, and focus, I was able to translate that to playing professionally a little bit in the Canadian Football League in Canada.
Nice.
Did that for 4 years. But while I was obviously in school, I got a degree, and that degree was in engineering. So that was hard work too. I wasn't one of the smartest kids, but I worked really hard and got myself graduated, with a lot of work. And then from that, had my engineering degree, again, played football for a few years. And then once I stopped playing football, I went back into the workforce as an engineer. So that was the transition there. Then in terms of getting my first engineering job, I found myself working for a consulting company. And that consulting company had an EPA project, a project with the Environmental Protection Agency, to help farmers, especially those with livestock, to use their manure and their stuff to build energy efficient farms. And so I helped that. It was called the Ag Star program. Really, really, really interesting. Got a chance to meet a whole lot of farmers around the country, help them to build some demonstration farms where they showed alternative energy projects around the country. Did that for 4.5 years, and then went into environmental consulting. And that environmental consulting is when you help industry who make stuff and then generate waste. I help the industry kind of supports their workflow so that they can take care of that waste and not harm the environment when they do it. So I supported a lot of industries like oil and gas, mining, manufacturing of all kinds, all over the world, and just helped them to build programs that did better for the environment, and did that for a number of years. So after all of that, and that was, I think it was about 10 years in that, I decided, let me look at some other ways to do some things. And I looked at LinkedIn for when it first started, and started looking at jobs around the world that I could do. In that context, I found some really interesting work that was out there. It's kind of fun to just what they call troll to see what was available for me.
Yeah.
I picked one that was very interesting, production safety for Sony Pictures. It seemed really interesting because they were asking me to do things that I'd already done for a lot of other industries, but for the entertainment business, I never knew this existed. But I decided, let me apply and see what happens. Have the story that my story told, and see if they accept me or not, if I fit. And lo and behold, apparently I did. And so I finally got that position. And then I've been in the entertainment business and supporting them ever since, moving since 4.5 years ago to Netflix.
This is so interesting. So you started in one thing, you were football and on the athletic, ended up doing some sustainability project where manure was involved out of all things, and ended up at Netflix in entertainment. So that was your journey.
Yes. And none of it was planned. None of it was planned. Even my first job, I actually had a referral from a professor at college who said, I don't know what you're doing. And I said, actually, I'm just a courier right now, driving my own car, delivering packages. And he says, well, I have an opportunity for you if you still want to be an engineer. And that's how that worked. So yeah.
Wow.
None of it
So
planned.
I'm sure parents and students who are going to listen to this and that are listening to this are dying to know how it is at Netflix. So I guess we better just stop right here, pause, and have a little commercial break. What is it like to work for Netflix?
Do you want me to answer that now?
Yeah, answer it. Go ahead. What is it
Okay.
like? I mean, I'm gonna ask you some other stuff, but yeah,
Okay.
what is it like to work for Netflix? That just seems cool.
Well, it's actually one of the most interesting jobs I've had, and I've had quite a few. One of the things that makes it interesting is every day is unique because we are empowering storytellers to tell their stories, and our growth requires us to look for unique stories. This is part of the reason why I've changed my tune over the course of my life to recognize the individual and the power of that individual to be themselves in any space. At some point in the world's history, in your history, someone will need to hear your story. So that's what we celebrate at Netflix, that at some point in history, in our history, we are going to be providing an opportunity for various storytellers to tell their stories, and then the knock-on effect of how that impacts the rest of the world. So working at Netflix is literally that. We are there in support of the storyteller. It is the one place that I know of that makes that the first and foremost part of its business model. Nice. Finding new storytellers, celebrating those stories, and then having a place for them to live forever. Obviously, there are other streaming services that exist now as a result, but we were the first there, and it's a wonderful place to be now that I'm supporting it actively and daily.
That's so cool. Okay. And so we're going to talk all about possibilities, like if Netflix has internships and stuff towards the end. But I also want to, I mean, we're talking about National Manufacturing Day that we're celebrating, and you're sharing that your journey was just all over the place after school and you picked up a lot of tools along the way. Where does technology play a role in all this? Because we talk about manufacturing and advanced technology. That's really what we're celebrating. And so in your experience, what role does technology play in all of this?
Another great question. These are awesome questions.
I got a bunch of them. I got like a list of them.
Absolutely. Obviously you do. You're just that amazing. So one of the things about technology is that it always enhances who we are as individuals and who we are as a collective. So in that context, if we have something amazing to do, the technology that we have usually serves to make that thing more amazing and to make that amazing more repeatable and more effective and reach more folks. So I think in that context, the technology has to serve the greater purpose that technology, if technology weren't there, the purpose would still be fulfilled. Technology is just meant to enhance that purpose. And I think if we look at it that way, there'll always be changes to how we connect people, but technology is meant to do that. Enhance what we do and then connect people to that purpose.
That's really interesting that you say that. And I know that some people are trying to understand what role technology is going to play in the future. I mean, the pandemic showed that technology was definitely credible. Like we need it, right? Everything stopped. And so the only way for connectivity was for us to do what we're doing now, right? But when I'm a student and I'm preparing for future work, and again, this is your perspective, and we're just offering perspective, parents. This is our perspective in this discussion. So you take whatever of this perspective that you want and make your own decision for you and your student. But in your perspective, knowing that we're a technology-driven world, right? What role am I playing as a human? And what role is technology playing?
Another great question. So in my opinion, as my perspective, as you mentioned, my perspective is that unless I have understood the human element, human interaction, human relationship, technology is not going to serve me well. If I don't understand human beings and I don't make relationships with humans a core driver for my success as a person, if I don't know how to have a conversation, if I don't know how to maintain relationships, if I don't want to do those things, technology will do something very well, but then it will stop in terms of its effectiveness. It won't be effective to me. I'll give you an example. This that we're doing right now, right? We are having a conversation leveraged by this wonderful tool called Zoom. If I had no intention of maintaining relationship with the humans behind the screen, technically, or in front of the screen here, technically, this would have only so much value. We would have nothing to talk about. We wouldn't know what to do with it once we got off the phone, and life would stop as soon as this conversation ended.
That's good. So for a student that's concerned or a parent that's concerned about maybe even IA, like technology taking over, robots taking over positions. It sounds like the connectivity is something that robots won't be able to do. They can't do the feeling thing and the engagement thing. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, what they say is garbage in, garbage out, even with robots or AI or whatever else. If we program to the extent that we only do very limited things with our robots, if we're literally saying, robot, all I want you to do is X, and I don't intend to do anything after that X, there's no Y and Z, then that is where the robot ends, and that's where my productivity ends. I have not planned for the humans that will leverage what's going to be built by that robot. So even if a robot builds something, I've got to think about the human that's going to use the product that it just built. If I don't care what the human's going to do with it, then my product isn't going to have much of a life after I've done building it.
Andrew, you're making it very hard for me to contain myself and stay in this parent professional mode, because I'm just super excited that you say that, because I do know that there's some fear there. And again, at Stream, we're working with all kinds of parents. We're working with single parents and, mom raising alone and dad raising alone. We have grandparents that are raising alone. And some of them, when you talk about tech, they are not even sure where the power button is. And then some are just like real advanced, right? They're building stuff and doing all kinds of stuff. But with such a huge, diverse market, if you're afraid of tech and you're thinking robots are going to take over everything, you just offered a lot of hope in things that students should be preparing themselves for. So just for clarity purposes, could you tell us some skill sets that students really should be focused on right now?
Absolutely. Well, give you an example of what's happening now with Zoom calls and COVID. The mental health field has taken a front step. They've taken so many leaps forward, because now every person, if you've talked to and listened to and watched the news about everything to do with this pandemic and its effect, mental health has become the forefront of people's minds. Folks who don't like to be alone, who are now forced to be in front of a screen, can't connect with folks. Folks who prefer to be alone still need support in how do I manage myself when humans are involved, right? We are still a human community. Yes. And at the core of everything, our tools are just that. They are tools. Technology is just a tool. As a matter of fact, our earliest tools were hammers and knives, etc., right? And so the tool is only as good as the person wielding that tool. And then the product that comes out of that still has to be in the service of the humans. And so that mental health is one field. We still have to eat. We still have to buy and sell things. We still have to use those things. We still have to repair those things. We still have to repair all of the tools, including robots and AI and computers. Humans do that. And even if robots were doing that, there still has to be a human who buys the product. At the end of the day, humanity requires humans in order for us to be a community. And so I think nothing changes from that perspective. What we do now as a result of all this is realize and rethink where humans fit in the cycle. And then accordingly, we support ourselves, we support each other to make sure that we are taken care of by the things that we leverage as tools. So I think we still need a lot of support. Humans are still frail, humans still grow old, humans still eventually pass away. None of that changes. All of the services and support that are required to keep us going as a society are still going to be there. Tools are just that. They are tools. They're not the end.
So the relevance of school, I mean, it's still this social connection, right? Correct. And you mentioned having influential buy-in from your instructor, right? And so having your instructor educate you and encourage you and inspire you to move on. So those are things that I can't see talking to my robot about that, right?
No.
And then you talked about storytelling at Netflix. And the funny thing, this is not funny, but it is kind of funny. All I thought of was if the robots came on and did a story tell, how not interesting that would be, right? So
yes, there'll be a lot of gaps because they wouldn't understand much of it. Exactly.
Right. So in the storytelling and content creation and all that, I believe that Netflix will still be trying to hire humans and not getting robot stories. So that would be.
Yeah, and to be fair, humans have to be the ones actually listening to the stories, right? It's so at the end of the day, we still need humans as customers at the very least. So,
right,
yeah, I think we're fine, really.
So for parents, what would you tell parents as a word of encouragement in terms of how to help their student navigate through these times where there's still some fear on human and what robots are going to be doing, even though we know that robots are going to play a role, but humans will always play a role as well. What would you be telling parents like myself who, and you, I mean, what do you tell yourself every day as you're encouraging your student to go to school and learn what they need to learn so they can be the best of themselves that they can be?
I think you said it right there. Be the best that they can be. First and foremost, in order for me to be the best at something, I have to understand what my capabilities are in that something. And so part of the big picture for understanding yourself as a student, and this is directly to students, is really just find out what you're about, what you like, what you don't like, being honest with yourself about all of that, and recognizing that, okay, I don't have to be great at everything. I just need to know what I like and what I can do, and to be the best at those things. Really build for yourself your own toolkit in yourself. So if you love to sing or dance, then be the best singer or dancer you can be, to figure out how many different styles there are and understand them. Learn about that thing. Be a real student of those things that you like. And then those things that you must have in order to be a functioning human, i.e. the ability to communicate with others, the ability to fend for yourself and all those sorts of things, be good at those things too, as best as you can. And then those other things that you don't quite like or don't fit who you are, that's okay. But I think a self-reflective piece is a starting point. And for parents to give their kids the space to understand that it's okay to be yourself, just figure out what those things are and we can support you in building yourself. I think those
okay,
are really
I need you to say that second part again, that last part. It's okay to do what parents should, what?
It's okay. It's okay for parents to let the child, to let their kids be themselves and to allow them to grow and understand themselves. Give them that space, support them in understanding what they are about. Once you do that, you give them confidence, and that confidence drives independent thought and independent learning. Because if I know that the minute I figured out I can figure out some math, I wasn't a genius, but the minute I figured out that I could do some math was the moment that I said, you know what? I'm going to do the best I can at this and see what happens. And then that became an experiment for me. Like, what can I do with whatever I know? And that was beautiful. I gained so much confidence, and the world now opened up to me. And even when I wasn't the best in the room, I felt confident enough to know I can do this, and this is the extent of it, but I'm good with that.
Okay. And so you came in with your confident self and pitched yourself to Netflix with all of your experience.
Yeah.
And you were your best self and showed up in the room. And what do you say to students that have like diverse backgrounds in education? So are you like everyone in your organization has to be from Ivy League schools and they have to have 1 million years in? I mean, what does that look like?
It's a broad base, because the entertainment business in and of itself is filled with different people who do different things. We have carpenters, we've got seamstresses, we've got makeup artists, we've got actors, we've got camera people, we've got laborers, we've got all sorts of things. The folks that are actually making the content, doing the work, are pretty much anybody and everybody in society. There's a representation of all the things that we do, literally. It's like a little town. Every production is its own little town. If you see somebody managing the waste disposal, there's somebody doing that. There's every realm of possibility. What's beautiful about it is that is the representation of what we all can be. So that's why I say there's opportunity everywhere. And so at Netflix, what we are is an accumulation of people who have had some connection to that little town that is this production. Yeah. They may have come up through production. They may have come up as a carpenter. They may have come up as anybody else, and they have now some experience, and that's what Netflix leveraged. Okay, so now you understand how it works. Help us to build more in this world. And so so the apprenticeship was started, I guess, through some of the work that we did out there in the world. Netflix brought me on after I showed myself in my engineering background. It brought in other folks who were former production assistants. So it's a myriad of ways that people come. And that, I think, is the key point of this. There is a level of apprenticeship that is doing the work out in the field. But eventually what happens is, if you're good at what you do, you're good at what you do. If you're confident in what you do, your confidence will show itself.
Nice.
And confidence doesn't mean I'm going to project something that I can't do and make people believe I'm good at it. It's no.
That's so good. Say
It's doing
that
what
part
you do.
again. Say that part just one more again. Just back up
Sure.
and say that again.
Sure. So confidence isn't projecting something that you're not good at and trying to convince others of that not truth. So confidence means I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm not good at, and I'm going to give you my best in what I am good at. And when I do, I fit, and I know I do. That's it. It's just that simple.
So good. So it would not be right of me to not talk about diversity in this conversation, because we are both very brown on this screen, right? And so I want to talk about what role diversity plays in not just Netflix, but in general. Like, what role for the little kid who is concerned about going into an organization like Netflix and showing up and being respected for the skills that they have? What would you tell that child? How would you tell them to show up in the room?
First thing, you are meant to be you, and the world needs you. That's the first thing. Just recognize the world needs you. Always had, always will. That's why you were brought to this world. Secondly, Netflix and any other entity known to man, any other business, really does well when the world is its customer. Everybody in the world, it doesn't matter who you are. If you are a customer, that company needs you and wants your perspective. They may not say it out loud, but they eventually say, what do they want? We need to know what they want and what they need, and let's find a way to give it to them. So you, by default, are important even from that basic bare minimum perspective. Now, if you're good at understanding yourself, then you can tell these companies what it is that they should be trying to do for you. And if that means being a customer liaison, if it means actually working for the company, your ability to translate that for them is vital. So that's why I talk about storytelling. Our companies are like Netflix and any other streaming model, any other entertainment business, they really need to understand what customers want, what the client wants, what the audience wants. So for you to understand you is critical for that and their long-term success and growth around the world. So please understand that your diversity means that you actually belong. Your belonging is what folks want to understand. What makes you feel like you belong, and what is it that allows you to continue to feel that way when you come to our shows? So yes.
And let me just open that up and just do a disclaimer. I just shared because I'm a brown woman, and so I'm sharing that just because I know some of the challenges I've had to navigate with in not having sometimes an Andrew to say, hey, just show up in your best self. So this deals with any type of diversity, anything that you feel is different or unique. That is exactly who we're speaking to at this point. I just shared an obvious for me, and that I know some other kid is probably thinking, well, how do I show up? But any individual that has something that they're uniquely different on, that is who we're speaking to. You show up in the room because you belong to be there. There's a spot for you somewhere. And according to Andrew, we just need to find our spot, our space.
Exactly. And sometimes, especially when you're new to some place where you are the first or the most unique individual in that space, sometimes folks need time to understand you. They might not know how, so you have to walk them through what it means to be you. And that takes a huge amount of strength. The ability first to be patient with others who need to hear your story. The second is the confidence in yourself to be able to stand up and say, nope, this is what makes me unique and I'm happy for it. And thirdly, of course, once you have that opportunity, how to continue to bring others to that table who are like you, so they can also bolster that story for you. So that first piece that I talked about earlier, which is understand yourself, take time to truly understand yourself and find confidence in what you are, who you are, and what you offer to the world. That time that you spend growing yourself, watering yourself, feeding yourself, and getting confident in strong roots allows you to stand up regardless of what winds come. Because at that point, you don't even have to do much talking. Just you being there changes the conversation in the room. Like, this is a shady tree. Who knew this tree was growing here? I knew. I saw them growing. That is who you can be no matter what. If you feed and grow yourself, eventually the world starts seeing you as that amazing tree that they didn't see before. So, so take that opportunity to take your time building yourself. And I guarantee you things will happen as a result.
There was so much in what you just said there. I'm writing, look, people don't see me, but I'm over here writing my own notes of inspiration that I'm going to be using on a daily. So thank you. Thank you for the clarity of that. And thank you for being very intentional with your words with that. I really, really appreciate that. So as we're celebrating Manufacturing and Advanced Technology Day, and you shared so many other great things, if a student is interested in like a Nextflix, do they have to wait until they have apprenticeship? I mean, is there any internships or what, are there any other points of entry?
It's a good question. Our company is growing so rapidly and we have things that change so quickly. I'd say I don't know. I believe there are opportunities, but individual departments house their own. What I will say though is if you are interested in the entertainment business overall, there are ways to get into it. First and foremost, signing on and becoming an apprentice with the individual trades that exist. So as I said, that's why I mentioned carpenters, I mentioned painters, I mentioned all sorts of things. Having those skill sets allows one to then get into it. I'm talking even writers, everything, anything to do with a show. If you see it happening, there's somebody there that's made it happen. So they're shooting guns, there's somebody who understands gun, they're armorers. If there's a big, huge, wonderful set, somebody's built it, painted it, decorated it.
You just said something, you said apprenticeships.
Yes, yes.
So you welcome apprenticeships and short-term programs and certificate programs, or
not through Nextflix, but it's through the unions themselves and the organizations. So there are ways that folks have folks. So in the context of the entertainment business overall, there are unions, labor unions, and those labor unions take on people.
Nice.
And in order to get out to those those laboring groups, one must actually apply for roles with these organizations or apply to productions and production houses themselves directly. So there are ways to do that. We are trying and to consolidate some of these things, but I think that's the first place is to find what you like. And then by doing that, take some initiative to go out into the space to find that out, where you can actually find your space. So if you graduate high school, or if you're just in high school and you want to be a laborer on a show, you can actually become a production assistant. Those production assistants then become basically aligned with any of those unions as they decide, hey, I like this. What can I do more? Someone tells you and they move on. So yeah, absolutely.
So I know in previous conversations, you and I have talked about the importance of understanding contracts and being able to negotiate your value. And do you still feel like that is relevant? I mean, or do you? Yeah, could you share with us like why? Because I know in some parents' mind, they're thinking traditional, come into a workspace, work 30, 40 years, retire. But from what I'm seeing with the kids, that's just not what they're interested in. They're interested in having a very diverse experience within their workspace. So could you explain to me what you meant by contracts and understanding it and knowing value and worth?
Great. Yeah. So I think the notion of work, as you mentioned, used to be start somewhere, spend decades at that space, moving yourself up, and then retiring. Those days, for better or for worse, are gone. The notion of actually knowing who you are in the space, applying yourself to a job, working it for as long as that project or job lasts, and then looking at other things to bolster your experience, that's part of what we're now seeing as the norm. One would actually have to probably move between jobs multiple times throughout their career in multiple locations, offering themselves opportunities wherever they can find them. The key to each step, of course, is to truly understand what you're offering based on your past experience and past training, and then what you gained in that particular job, and then reflecting that in some sort of resume, which then or just generally keeping track of the skills you have and then presenting it to the next employer saying, I got this before, and now for this recent thing I did, I learned this much more, and here's how I can help you. I see the future with you here. And so negotiations basically are you telling your story, not just where you were, but what you see of yourself, and then where you see yourself going in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of storytelling is critical to getting people to believe in you. Because once they listen and hear your story, it could be as unique as mine or even way more unique. And there are way more unique stories than mine. You actually almost give people hope that, wait a minute, I never saw that as an opportunity, but now that you said that about yourself, I could actually see you being here and helping us to grow to this next level, because I now see an opportunity in that space that you never, if I didn't meet you, I wouldn't have otherwise seen. So there's an opportunity by learning your story and understanding how well you can adapt. That's the key point to many people, and believing in you as the next person they can bring on board.
What do you also think about a work environment? So your work environment changes quite a bit. I know sometimes you're here and sometimes you are not. So where has your industry allowed you to go and travel to?
Pretty much everywhere. I've not been to Antarctica, but I've been to pretty much every continent. Australia, really? South America, North America, Europe, and Asia. And yeah, so I've been everywhere. So not everywhere within those continents. I'm still working through the calendar, the schedule and stuff, see what I can get to. However, what that means though, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is that entertainment first and foremost is a place where we're now mining for new stories, right? And so those new stories have to come from quote unquote new environments, new places. From a North American perspective, we don't know stories from other parts of the world. So our North American company, Nextflix, is investing in those other stories and bringing those stories to the life of others who've never seen them. So that's one aspect that allows this to be a really cool thing for entertainment. One can probably find their way to going around the world to do those things. Now, but there are other industries around the world that do manufacturing that are invested in resource management and resource development. There are things, those around all these sorts of industries where the world is quite honestly wide open. I mentioned earlier that I trolled LinkedIn for about 8 to 9, maybe almost 9 months to a year, just looking at what was out there, just letting the stories come to me. I put in a job kind of suggestion, and they would send me emails that told me exactly what kinds of things existed around the world. And I opened it up to the globe, and it was amazing what I saw and what I did not know existed. So one of the things that I always tell people is, please, now that technology is so universally easy to get to and information is so ubiquitous, so easy as well to get to, please take advantage of the fact that you can do a global search for anything that you put your mind to. If I wanted to be an undertaker and I put globe, where can I be an undertaker? Everywhere in the world has humans. So being an undertaker is actually quite a universal truth, right? So the concept of being stuck is no longer a thing. And travel is also much more simple to get through and to do. So when you put both of those things together, you have opportunities that transcended what our parents were able to do. And our parents did travel quite a bit too.
That is so good. So in the future of work, you see this more of the same, where people will be traveling, and how do you see the interview process? Do you see interview being where you go into a room and still talk, or how can students even prepare for the interview?
That's a good one. Oh my gosh, I love that question. So interviews, I think it's going to be all of the above. It could be in a room. It could be an interview that is an experiential one, where somebody says, come over and I'm going to show you a couple of things and you show me what you can do. I could see that being a real thing. I can see, again, the Zoom call being a thing. I could see internships being like the starting point for conversation, which allows, and I call it conversation on purpose, because internships are conversations, just a long-term conversation where you are telling your story through what you do and they're seeing what you can do, and you each are figuring out how you've worked together. So I see it all as a thing. I think at the key and the heart of everything, and I've leveraged this with everything that I've done, it's all a conversation. And so I go back to that point that we made earlier about what is technology going to do to us in our society. If we learn, even if we're the most introverted people in the world, if we learn how to have a conversation, where all we do is say, look, I don't know everything, and I'm sure you don't. Let's find out more about each other. When you interview, take it as an opportunity to have a conversation. Don't try to sell yourself. Don't try to go into their heads and try to pick out things that you might be able to convince them of.
Yeah.
Literally just present yourself in the conversation. If you have learned to have a conversation, even if it's a short one, it has meaning, and that meaning sticks with each party. The best times I've had in interviews, whether being interviewed or doing the interviewing, is when it was a conversation, because now I can envision what the future would be like with that person. So I think
I like it. I think that's the reason why this is this is so comfortable, because we just talking, two parents just talking about kids. So I love that. Yes. So that's very interesting. You mentioned a couple of skill sets that people need, and that students will need. Conversational. You also mentioned research, exploring different position, global mindset. So even though I may be positioned within a certain area or city, the world is at my fingertips. I can be working somewhere else. Does that sound about right?
That is perfectly right. Exactly right. And as a matter of fact, now that technology is what it is, one could work from their home and work for someone else somewhere else in the world too, right? So we don't always have to be in the place within which we're working. However, it's still a conversation. Once one understands how to listen actively to people from other cultures, from other backgrounds who don't think quite like we do. Once you develop that skill where you ask the person about their life first, have them tell you what they are about and who they are, you then realize, oh my gosh, I just found places where I fit into their life story, right? And so one of the things I found fascinating, I've tested this theory, is I used to be a person who wanted to dictate how things worked in terms of a conversation. I wanted to be the one driving the conversation.
Not you.
Yeah, I know, it's weird. It's weird. But through my travels, one of the things I always started doing was asking folks, well, who are you? What are you about? I got rid of everything I wanted to do with that person and said, you tell me first what you're about. I don't care if it takes a whole day. I want to find out who you are. When I did that and I removed my wants from that conversation, that opened the door for them to be their true selves and for me to do the same. And then we share the stories. And by the time we're done, whatever this thing that I want to solve, whatever the thing that I want to do with them that was meant for the work, usually was solved somewhere in that conversation. Somewhere we brought it up and somehow it just happened. It's like, I think we just came to a solution, didn't we? Yes, we did. And that was where it really clicked, that the connection I made was actually the solution that we needed.
That's so good. I mean, everything you're saying is just so good. I'm like, I don't know if I'm the parent or the student right now. All of it is just stuff. It's just good discussion. So I'm a student. I need to think globally. The world is changing. The future work is changing. There needs to be more stories, more content. While I'm in school, I should be focusing on being in school and learning, and parents should be focused on giving their students room to learn and grow and explore and to try things out within reason, right? Because we want them to stay on the right track. We don't want them to explore the negative things. I should be embracing diversity and change and experience. And for students that are bilingual, what would you say to them? I mean, thinking of the global market in the future for them, what would you say to bilingual students?
Oh, they are in the front seat. They can do whatever they want. As a matter of fact, because they're bilingual, that means they have an affinity for language, which means they can actually learn another one in any language, any kind, and they can be cross-cultural much more than those who are monolingual. I have to say from experience, I know that that's the thing. Once your ear develops the ability to hear something different and understand it, you now become more mindful, and you now can actually navigate faster than almost anybody else. So anybody who has an accent, the first time I hear an accent, I'm like, this is one of the smartest people in the room because they figured it out. And they know what's going on.
Develop an accent. I'll write that down. I'm going to develop an accent. Okay. But this is good because for students that get, they don't understand why they have to take those Spanish classes or a foreign language. This is really good what you're saying, because you just basically said that the sky is the limits for them because they have multiple language. They can go into multiple environments and just navigate that environment in comfort. Is that?
Absolutely. In comfort, or at least they can connect people. Their ability to connect more than just themselves to their work, but others to that thing they're talking about. Another person over there who's thinking. Right? Sorry. At the end of the day, you can edit that out. At the end of the day, though, what happens with all of this is one's ability to connect with as many different people as possible. That's the notion of diversity. Again, one of the things that's been said a bunch of times about diversity is we just want people who look different or who are different. But the next phase of inclusion and diversity is you want people to belong so that their input is actually used by the collective, that we are working together as opposed to just having a smattering of people who look different. So that's why language is important. That's why understanding different languages is really critical. Once a company understands that they can walk in somewhere and understand their customer much more quickly, that's an advantage that most companies realize now is an added value. And anybody who has multi-languages at their disposal, honestly, they're way ahead of the game. And please understand that there's nothing deficient about you at all. It doesn't matter what people tell you. You are the most efficient groups of people in the world because you now understand more than one thing.
That's so good. I have a question because I do know that some students have struggled through school. And so what would you tell a student that just is still trying to find their way, may have struggled through the traditional type of school, and they're trying to understand what next steps are? What words of encouragement would you give to them?
My first word of encouragement is you are impressive because you're working through something. And that something is providing you some level of understanding of yourself, but it's also strengthening you. And it doesn't feel like it at all. But when you think about anyone who, quote unquote, is managing a challenge, the challenge actually builds something in them. They don't know it through the challenge, but it's building something. So my advice to them is first, keep working on what is challenging you, but to give yourself more confidence and courage, find those things that are not challenges for you, especially those things that truly help those around you, and lean on those, because those people that you're supporting and helping will give you the courage to continue on challenging yourself on those things that are really difficult for you. And so it's a duality. You have to live in both places. Challenge yourself on those things that you're not really good at yet, honestly, because those skills you build, even if they're small, even if they're minor, will still be useful somewhere. But those things that you do really well, use that confidence, use that enthusiasm that gives you that space of healing, that gives you that space of peace, because you will need both. And I have to say this from experience. I wasn't, as I said, when I say I barely made it through university, I kind of barely made it through university. I don't like to tell that all the time, but it's true. But at certain points, the work that I did, math, hated math. But I figured out at some point.
I did not see you as a hater of math. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's at certain points in my academic career, I literally hated it. I just couldn't get it. Just somehow it didn't click. But one of the things that my parents told me was keep working at those things that are hard for you, because anything you pick up, that hard fought battle, it'll stay with you. Anything you fight for will stay with you. And it was true. So I literally worked my way to remembering some of the things that I learned, even though I couldn't figure out the rest. And I said, I'm gonna hold on to this because this is valuable. And then eventually, after persisting, a couple of those things clicked. It was like, oh, I didn't get it like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years ago, but now I do, because somebody allowed me to practice it in some application somewhere where my hands got dirty. And I was like, I get it now. That makes sense. So don't ever shy away from the battle and the fight, because that battle and fight will have something that sticks with you forever. And eventually that thing will be useful to you. And as I said, now I'm using math. I'm still not a mathematician by any means, but I now at least can understand the purpose of it. And then those people who are struggling with it, I'm like, okay, you don't need to know all of this, but you do need to learn this. So learn that. And I can give people a sense of perspective about what is important now, because I stuck through it and I stuck with it. So I can at least give advice to those coming after me.
You just freed a lot of people who don't understand why they have to do X's, how X's and Y's are numbers. And you freed a lot of people it will be useful at some point. You just don't know when.
Exactly. And even if you don't understand all of it, the ability to translate the context is really helpful. As I said, it's again, I just know why it works and in what context. And then like the experts will take that. But when there's some expert explains it to me, now at least I can say, I think I got you. I think I do. As a matter of fact, now I get it because you explained to me. Now I remember what that thing was. So like weightlifting, at some points, weightlifting is a hard thing, or exercising in general, or eating right. Mm-hmm. Nobody sees why it's important in the moment, but eventually over time, you see the value that builds up, and you recognize what it did for you and how it made you stronger, made you more resilient. Mm-hmm. So I just hold on to that. But then at the other times, I also understand what I love to do, and that comes easily. I'm never going to fault myself for that either.
That's good. Well, us at Stream, our objective is to connect the dots between education and career. And so we're trying to make that connectivity through sharing stories like yours. And so I'm going just to end this with just asking you this question. Mm-hmm. What role do you believe industry and education plays together in student readiness and career readiness? What role do you think that they play, or how do you think they could work together to ensure students are ready for this thing called future work?
I think we in industry have a real obligation to continue to connect with those who are learning to get their way to helping and supporting us. So all of these future employees, future partners, future leaders, it's our job to distill, i.e. to break down what is necessary in very basic terms, and to let time tell us how we make it work, and let relationship tell us how to make it work, but truly make it easy for folks to understand generally what we're trying to do and what we need as we move forward. I don't think industry has done a great job up to a point. I think we're building that and we're growing, and things like this are so amazing because we can actually make it easy for folks to understand. Okay, so you're saying I don't have to be an expert in math, but I should understand what it looks like and how it works. Yes. You don't mean I don't have to be an expert in anything, but I do have to understand context. Yes. You're telling me that I have to learn how to communicate with folks and that humans are the source of our success? Yes. Those kinds of basic building blocks for success, I think, are what allow our students to say, okay, to your point, I think I know where I might fit, but I'm okay with trying it out and experimenting with my life and within reason and with support. Mm-hmm. As long as we provide that support, that safe space to attempt experimentation, I think our kids, no matter who they are, and our learners, no matter how old we get, can continue to contribute to a much better collective of human beings.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for everything you said here. I don't even want to end this discussion, but I only gave us 60 minutes. I can't believe I did that. I should have given us longer. So I'll have to invite you back at some point. But is there any last minute things you want to say to parents, or any, words of encouragement? Because it's hard. I mean, you have a long time you'll be with your kids, trying to maneuver them through life, and things come up. You mentioned mental health, and then on top of pandemics and